people who we want to select in particular for mention. So if there's somebody who's passed, you can include their name, or somebody who's ill, or somebody who you think is in particular need. Please feel free to add their name. You can pass this around. Thank you so much.
And in that same spirit, when we begin anything that we do at Dawn Mountain, and really this is intrinsic to the entire tradition, even for beyond Buddhism, we begin by reciting, and that's what we'll recite together in a moment, what are known as the 4 immeasurables of equanimity, love, compassion, and joy. And this we wish for everyone, and this we also seek to cultivate ourselves. And then a very famous aspirational expression from Shantideva we also recite. It's from his famous text, the Engaging in the Bodhisattva Deeds. And so that just opens us up to, brings us to the portal of the kind of open-hearted aspiration for benefiting all beings throughout space that really underlies and pervades all our activities. So we'll sing that together, and then we'll just rest in silence for a minute or two so we can settle a bit, can rest with attention on your breath. And then we'll start our program. Okay. May all beings always have happiness and its causes. May all beings always be free of pain and its causes. May all beings always be pain-free and live happily. May no beings ever cling to those near nor spurn those far. For as long as space abides, as long as the world remains, just so long may I be there, resolving all beings' pain. And feeling the solidity of the cushion that is supporting you, feeling the support also of your own body and bones, feeling the support of the natural alignment through the center of your body. Just very simply, not thinking about it, but just feeling into it as makes sense for you. Just have a minute or two of just sitting, just quietly sitting with your breath. And then Harvey and I will sing an invocation, and we'll begin. Kyabda Gyalwanam Tangyer Me Pe Gandrin Sumden Chinchen Lama Che Ridzin Chorme Tupden Jasula So Adev Sonyam Lentar Shin Shu. Good evening. Welcome. We're glad to see you. Thank you for coming. We are here to talk about the Dzogchen Cycles program, Dzogchen Cycles, Heart Essence Transmissions. This is a program that is really the culmination of maybe all of our, Harvey and my study and practice. And we have been profoundly affected. I'll speak for myself. You know, in my life, the very greatest thing really has been meeting with these teachings and practicing them and receiving instruction on them and reading texts about them and trying to figure out what was going on. And, you know, slowly over time, gradually finding that, yes, the path does open, even for me. And really, what a tremendous gift it is to be part of this transmission lineage, which we acknowledge by the invocation that we just sang to Dzogchen Pema Rinpoche, and from whom it extends backwards through time to the very origins of these traditions. And I think for me, what has been very, very key is that the Tibetan traditions, as many of you know, are very rich and very vast and can seem quite overwhelming. And at the same time, they're very rich and very deep and very attractive and very delicious and very nourishing if we can touch into them in a way that works and makes sense to us. And it was really out of a deep desire to offer a program, a sequence of teachings that would be both coherent and cohesive, not getting lost in different tracks, but really move like a river toward the ocean, which rivers are always moving toward, of the Dzogchen teachings, which actually are embedded in every part of the path that we are discussing. And to offer this in a way that would be genuinely digestible, usable, practicable, integratable into the lives of all of us who, after all, live in the West. We are not monks, we're not nuns. Harvey and I, like most of you, I think, have jobs, have families, have responsibilities. And so we really need a paradigm, a structure that works for us. And that means also a structure of study and practice that works for us. Not everybody can do a 3-year retreat or even a 3-month retreat. And yet the practices that we engage in are absolutely built on skills that all of us already have. You all know how to breathe, I think. We all know, we all know how to use our senses to see, to talk, to investigate, to use our imagination. We even know a little bit about stillness and just being. We already know about these things. So fundamentally what we're seeking to do is to develop skills that we already have, and to do this in a way that is going to feel genuinely assimilable. And that's what we're doing with this program, and that's what we want to lay out tonight for you in talking about the why. I've already said a little bit about why to offer this kind of coherent, digestible program. Why, who, what and how. That's what we're going to talk about tonight, with plenty of time for conversation and questions. So just keep track. And for those of you who are joining us outside this room, we're very happy to feel that we are in a very large room in which you are also sitting. And thank you also for joining us. Okay.
So in terms of the why, I was trying to contemplate what to say, and I think in a very, very simple way, we're really talking about sharing something that's extraordinarily precious to us, and clearly also to the Buddhist teachers that we've had. But it's to share something that's precious. And those of you who know us well know that we love birds. And on our wall, very close to the temple, there is one traditional painting that's a kind of a symbol of what translators were. The traditional translators in Tibet were kind of understood to be two-headed birds. And we've got at least, each of us, two heads as birds ourselves. And it's actually a fantastically accurate image for us, because it captures the reality that many of you, most of you, don't need to engage in, but we did. And that is, we learned Tibetan language, both written and spoken. And we've spent over 3 years in Asia. And so that's one head. And that's the head that looks to the tradition. And we are two-headed in the sense that we really hold the tradition in amazing regard, respect, and reverence, and wish to the extent possible, pass on the wisdom and the meaning and the depth and the freedom of the tradition. So that's one head. And the other is, we are fully Western beings, modern Western beings. And we are very, very aware of and sensitive to all of the realities that we in the modern situation experience. And it's very, very different practicing in an urban environment right next to a football stadium as opposed to practicing in a grassy knoll somewhere in the hills of Tibet. I mean, we could just go on for days just talking about all the differences. Just think about cars and versus horses. So we have two heads, and we're proud of it, and it's a particular gift that we bring to you as students, to have two well-headed birds with two heads apiece guiding you. And really, I always like to make jokes, but there's also really a moment of, it's really quite a moment for us. We've reached a certain age. We have practiced a lot. We've each been involved with serious practice for between 40 and 50 years. And there's something to offer out of that. And we're tremendously happy to do that and moved to do that. And at the same time, just speaking for myself, you know, I've been engaged in serious practice for, like I say, between 4 and 5 decades. And I've also had my emotional difficulties. Been in therapy probably 2/3 of my life, and have had to really think about the intersection of spiritual life, modern life, emotional life, and how those things really interdigitate. And I don't think we can, occasionally traditional teachers will have some very, very pithy suggestions and insights and emotional supportive things to offer us. But at the same time, we live in some pretty particular and some pretty peculiar waters. And, taking on a practice that's 800 years old and, 21st century poses challenges for all of us. Even if it's just, how do I put my iPad away and find some time to sit? You don't have to go to therapy for that, obviously. But negotiating relationships, negotiating family, negotiating losses, negotiating career, while at the same time holding something very, very profound can create some emotional conflicts, or there are pre-existing emotional conflicts. And I think one of the very, very special things that we both bring is a sensitivity to the real issues that we all confront in taking on spiritual practice in this modern era. And we, because of the work we've done on ourselves, I think are able to, you hopefully wouldn't have to sit in therapy for 2/3 of your life. Hopefully we can, if you were to need it, make it briefer, shorter, and easier, and we can also maybe anticipate some of the issues that people face as they're engaging in spiritual life in the modern West. We are also moved to do this and supported in doing this by, it's a bit of a strange thing to talk again in the modern situation, but there really is this stream of blessings that pours forth all the way from the time of the Buddha through the major figures of the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, through to our teachers. And this is something that becomes clearer and more palpable to us as we practice more and more. And we want to be conduits to that stream of inspiration and blessings and realization to all of you. And it's all of our teachers, and from time to time we will mention them specifically. And along with all of our teachers, we are focusing a lot of what we're teaching on the tradition that has been revealed most recently to Adzon Pelo Rinpoche, along with his sister Jatsul Pema. And that tradition also meets back to the teachers Adzon Drukpa, and then Jigme Lingpa, and then Longchen Rabcham, and Padmasambhava. These are just some of the key figures whom we will be drawing our inspiration, our guidance, and that we want to share with you. And to say that, we recently were in China, and we talked about this program with Adzon Pelo Rinpoche by phone and with Jetsun Kacha Wangmo in person. And they were both very, very supportive and very, very enthusiastic. We couldn't have had a more enthusiastic response from both of them. And in particular, we were kind of amazed that Adzon Pelo Rinpoche, in particular, he is what's called a treasure revealer in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, and this is a very, very unusual status. We'll probably say more about treasures as time goes on, but this is kind of a blessing to bring forth material that it's either in the ground or in the sky or in one's mind that's been planted there in prior lives when the time is appropriate. And some of his most recent and most precious treasures, he encouraged us to share with sincere students, and that was just amazing for us to hear. And these are Dzogchen. These are out of his what is called the Ösel Nyingtik, the Clear Light Heart Essence tradition. So just very, very briefly, all also, as part of the why, what is Dzogchen? It means the great completeness or the great perfection. In the Nyingma, which is the old translation lineage of Tibetan Buddhism, it's considered the pinnacle of the teachings. And why is it a pinnacle? Because it is said to be capable of liberating us from the process of painful rebirth in one lifetime. So the teachings are so profound, so efficacious, and ultimately so easy, not necessarily at the beginning, but ultimately so easy that they open us to the nature of our mind clearly, and if we know the nature of our mind clearly, we are ripe for liberation in one lifetime. Anyone who knows Anne and I well knows that we kind of bandy all sorts of ideas back and forth for days, months, and years. And we have for years been talking about, how do we kind of soup up what we're offering and make it a bit more intense, a bit more detailed, a bit crunchier. And this particular 3-year program, we definitely can attribute to Anne, though the context is our infinite number of conversations. So we've had brainstorming about what's going to be best for students here at Dawn Mountain. One of the features that we'll talk more about, but this 3-year program is now including a kind of high intensity 1-week retreat that will be at Dawn Mountain, which will be from morning to evening practice and teachings at Dawn Mountain once a year. And we want that to both go deep into the meaning of the teachings and also allow people to digest the meaning of the teachings. Again, we're doing this in integrity with the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, and of the many gifts that Anne has, she has been, for the last 20 years, every time she gets a Tibetan liturgy in her hands, it's like she can't even wait. She just starts translating it into chantable English, which means that we can do liturgy in the exact same form and with the exact same musical signature that they use in Tibet. And that's quite significant because the music and the chant has a kind of conveyance that, if you just sort of say it prosaically, doesn't quite do it. And so that's part of the integrity that we're maintaining. But another thing that's, we think, quite unique, and we do spend a lot of time on it, is that we take a lot of cognizance of the emotional and the cultural and the psychological realities that obtain here as opposed to Tibet. I mean, just a simple thing like, imagine being at the lowest 12,000 feet, maybe highest 18,000 feet, and pretty much everything is either up or down. I mean, there's really not much horizontal. Tibetans have to be in their bodies. I mean, it's just part and parcel of survival. If they're not, they fall off the cliff. So they're really grounded in their legs and their bellies. They know what's going on. I mean, almost all of us in the West, modern West, we live from about here up. We're not in our bodies. We just aren't. No blame, it's just we're not there. We've got to use our brains. We've got to be brainiacs. And so something that comes kind of naturally to Tibetans, namely being in their bodies, is not going to get any attention from a traditional teacher coming to the West. They're not going to say anything about, you should be in your bodies when you practice this. But we've seen what it's like when people aren't in their bodies and they start practicing. It's like, to steal from the Yiddish, oy vey. I mean, it's not good. It can get very, very out there. And people are attracted to Buddhism who are already kind of and if they start practicing and they're not in their bodies and they are started out and they're kind of helicoptered out, and then give them a practice that might helicopter them out even more, it's not balanced. So we need to help people understand what a body is and what being in one's body is. And that for us is part of practice. We need to understand in this culture what it means to have a spiritual friend, what a relationship means. We're so autonomy driven, we live in our own houses, we might not know our neighbors, we might not know people sitting next to us in a spiritual community. And there's a lot to be gained from doing practice in a community. Again, part of culture and part of the tradition and traditional Tibetan culture is, Sangha, the spiritual community. But they're also a traditional culture. They just sort of naturally are very relating one to another. It's not natural for us. Our natural inclination is to be isolated. So we have to actually think about how do we allow people to support one another in practice. These are very, very critical things, and they create the context, the mandala, the holding that allows us to spend more and more time practicing, which if not in place, people don't feel supported in their practice. So we can go on to maybe say some things about the who of who we are, and we also have a little snippet from Adzan Rinpoche's sister, Jatsul.
Well, I think a lot of who we are has come out already. But I can say that one thought I had very early on, when I graduated from college not having learned anything about Buddhism, but having an inexplicable determination to go to India. That was as far as I could take my intentionality. I had to go to India. And so I went, of course, to graduate school first in Buddhist studies, actually, so that I would have some reason to go to India. And and that was when I first got to study something about Tibetan Buddhism, because in those days there was not much. There was really nothing in English yet. And it just so happened, not only did I meet Harvey in that program, but Jeffrey Hopkins, who was the translator for the first 10 years of the Dalai Lama's visits to this country, and with Robert Thurman, I think the first people Western Americans anyway, who were fluent in Tibetan language. And he started to teach Tibetan. He invited the great master from the Tantric College of Lower Lhasa, Khyentse Ngawang Lekten, who came. He was famous throughout Tibet for his brilliance, and he came and he taught us about dependent arising and emptiness. And he taught us about what a cultivated mind could become. I'm going to tear up just thinking about it. These were the so-called 60s, and everybody was wow and high, or at least that's what was getting mirrored back to, our generation. And here was someone out of a culture I knew nothing about, and he knew that they had an intellectual richness that he conveyed as he talked about shades of understanding, shades of attention and stability and clarity with such refined description. It was like nothing I'd ever heard. And I thought, that's it, that's for me. This is more interesting and honestly makes more sense than anything I've heard. That's just how I felt. And so I really have to organize my life so that I can keep studying about this. So I already knew I wanted to go to India, and now I knew why I would go to India. And actually, Khyentse helped me figure out what I would study. I would go to India and I would study with the Tibetans. And so I did that and met some amazing teachers, had an audience with His Holiness. At that time, anyone could, really. And His Holiness suggested I study with Geshe Rabten, Ladi Rinpoche, and I studied at the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives, which is still in Dharamsala. That was the first year. And I just couldn't believe how happy I was and how interesting it all was, and how fantastic the teachers were. And one of the things, and some of you heard me talk about this before, that I think I can say this about all my teachers in very different ways, because they're all very different as human beings. But in one way or another, they seem to combine intellectual brilliance. I mean, they had memorized more text than I'd read, probably, and thought about, not just memorized, though, but thought about them, could argue them in debate, could exquisitely express them. I mean, they were learned rhetoricians, and they weren't uptight about it at all. You know, this idea of it just being in your head and being shut off from your body and maybe your imagination and your feelings too, they weren't like that. They were brilliant and they were full of heart. And I just thought that was amazing. So I remember thinking something like, I'm not at all like that. I didn't figure out I had a body, actually, until the first time I went to Tibet, because of that up and down thing. And I really felt transformed by that, realized that I just had to. I was already practicing for many years, but, and with the help of a very skillful friend, also realized that I was getting quite, my crown, my throat, my heart, maybe were cracking open a little bit, but, I just didn't know anything about my body, really. And that's why, those of you who've studied with us, we pay a lot of attention to being in the body. You noticed even what little instruction I gave tonight. I said, notice the support that you feel from your cushion, right? So I just felt in Kohe, a very powerful way, if I ever get anywhere, because I was as, disoriented and crazy and incompetent in all kinds of ways, as anybody you might imagine. And I thought, if I make any kind of progress, even a little bit, even just kind of edge toward normal through this teaching, then I'm going to have to tell other people about it. So it can be a slow path. It's not a jazzy path. It's not, what was the thing that was big a couple of decades ago? I don't know, the people who promise you, one seminar and your life will change forever. We're not promising that. If that's what you're here for, I'm sorry. That's not been our experience. My experience has been that really deep opening can occur, it will occur. We're actually built for it. When we talk about Buddha nature, as we will in a moment, because that's part of our 3-year program, a big part of it, once we realize what we actually are, it's kind of clear that if we just kind of pick up a little bit on our side, pay attention in certain ways, do some practice, yes, we can transform. It's like, will ice melt if you put it in the sunshine? You might not believe that a glacier could melt, right? Because it just seems so robustly a glacier, but as we're learning, and as we know from childhood, you take an ice cube out of the refrigerator, it just seems so solid, it's ice. But of course it's built to melt. We're also built to shed our impediments if we pay attention. And so that's my very strong part of my kind of energy and love and impetus for wanting to share this as best as we possibly can, because it's real and it will impact you. There's every promise. It won't be overnight. In 5 years there'll be some shifts, but there'll be a lot of garbage left to take out. It's a lifelong path, but it's profound. It's really has a profundity and a preciousness, to use Harvey's words, that in my experience is not matched by anything. And we want to make that available and real right here in the world that we live in, with all of its chaos and difficulties and challenges. And that's why we're here.
So I don't want to kind of, belabor things. I'll just say that my quest started about 1964. It got really crystallized in a lecture I went to here by the then Richard Alpert. He became Ram Dass. It was on LSD, cognitive psychology, and Oriental mysticism. And, it was a kind of a seed that just blew up. And, as we go through life, it's clear that nothing makes any sense as we're looking forward, but when we look backwards, it's sort of like, wow, this made sense, or this added up, and, the path just sort of unfolded in a particular way. And just to mention a few highlights that, in 1971, I'd already gone to graduate school from 1966 to 1970 to study Buddhism. In 1971, we were in India for 2 years together, meeting a lot of teachers. I did a lot of Theravada meditation at the time, studied with some great Tibetan teachers at the same time. And then in 1974, we had the great good fortune to live with Khetsen Sangbo together in Charlottesville, Virginia, and followed up that visit with him in 1977. We spent a summer, kind of 2 whole months, studying with Khetsen Sangbo nonstop, and he just selflessly offered us Dzogchen teachings. And then from 1999 forward, Adzum Pela Rinpoche started coming to the United States, and we both worked on making that happen, and Dawn Mountain as an organization sponsored that and organized it, and we deepened our relationship with him, and there's a particular karmic relationship that he has with Anne that's amazing. But he has taught us well and taught us deeply, and has also encouraged us as teachers of what he's bringing forth. And many of you don't know him and haven't even met him. And it's kind of amazing to meet a what shall I call it, a religious exemplar, or really a unique, historic religious figure in the flesh, who is in every sense larger than life. His imagination is humongous, and capacities are unbelievable. And just to mention one thing, which we can't even fully appreciate because sometimes our language isn't good enough, but he'll just start singing these Dzogchen songs of realization. And we know enough Tibetan to know that it wouldn't be that easy to just kind of ad-lib this stuff. And they're kind of amazing, and it's just one small element. But he decided to make a tanka. So these are tankas. These are wall hangings. But he decided he needed something like, I don't know, it may be 400 feet by 400 feet tanka.
I think it's 9 stories high, or is it
so
22? It takes 200 people to carry it.
Yeah, when they carry it, it's 200 people. And then the only place you can put something like that up, there are no 9-story buildings where he is. So they have to put it on a mountain side. And it's just, his mind is humongous. And like I say, his energy is kind of humongous as well. So he's blessed to be coming forth with these treasures, and that's going to be part of the program. But we'll be saying more about that. Let's see. What?
I wonder if we shouldn't say a little bit more about the program before we show Anila. feel
I
like
think we should show Anila first.
Really?
I feel,
I
I
haven't
do.
said anything about the program yet.
Hmm? I think.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Okay. All right.
All right. Why don't we, we'll
So
show you
we
just a little
want to-
snippet.
We are about to actually tell you what is in the program. And we, in August, Jatsul made a little video for us because we told her that we were going to have this event. So we want to show you that. And just to say, so Jatsul Kachawangmo is Rinpoche's sister. She is a great teacher in her own right. She is regarded as an incarnation of Tara. I personally have heard a Chinese taxi driver address her as Tara as he was opening the door for her in a taxi in a remote town of Sichuan. And she's also regarded as the reincarnation of Chime Wangmo, who was a great female practitioner and doctor. And she and Rinpoche were also brother and sister in their previous life, when they were the children of Adzom Trukpa, who is depicted on that tanka there. You could point to it, Claire, maybe? Yes. Who's a great figure in this lineage as well. And we just want you to see part of our spiritual family in all her Jatsul. And the beautiful voice you were hearing, if you came in while the music was still playing, is her. She's famous for singing at the great prayer festivals that they have in Tibet. One night, Christmas Eve, she sang, and these are songs actually that Rinpoche has come forth with. He comes forth with music as well as words, and she sings them, and she did this one Christmas Eve in Christchurch Cathedral. And people still, as of a few years ago, sometimes stop me on the street and they say I was there that night. People were in tears, even though, of course, she was singing in Tibetan. So that's just a little bit about her. Okay, this is... And Gary has very kindly made... honey. So, how does she know what our program is? Because I sent her a list in Tibetan of the texts that we are drawing from. And she also showed this to Rinpoche. And we are calling, in English, we call this program Dzogchen Cycles, Heart Essence Transmission. And this is a way of expressing a phrase that Rinpoche came up with many years ago. It's actually a name that he gave his community, a very beautiful name, about 4 o'clock in the morning, I think, in my house. A few of us are sitting around. Dzogchen Nyingtik. So Dzogchen, of course, is Dzogchen. Dzog means great. It means complete. And Dzog by itself means complete, or it means perfect. It's complete in the sense that everything is included, meaning that all of the practices that we are doing, in ways that I'll say a little bit more about shortly, are part of, are imbued with, are suffused with Dzogchen. And Chen means great. So the word Dzogchen, you often see it translated as the great perfection. You also see it translated as the great completeness. And what it is identifying, that name is identifying, is that we, all of us, no matter what we look like from the outside, we, all of us, right now, already, since forever, are a great completeness. But we can't see it. It's like gold underground. You know, it's pure gold, and there's nothing you have to do to that gold to fix it up, but you have to part the earth. Or it's like a flame in a cup. These are actually examples from one of the first texts we'll be studying. And the flame is fine. It's burning. It's shining. You don't have to, look for a flame, but you do have to open the cup or perforate the cup. Many, many metaphors like this. So Dzogchen, the great completeness, is a teaching, much like Chan, if you're familiar with Chan or Son or Zen, that its starting point is that already everything, that means everything in you, in the depths of who and what you already are, is perfect. And we look at our lives and we think, that sounds pretty crazy. And so we do some investigation and see how we can come to recognize this in ourselves. And that's really what the path is about, to see what's always been there. So Dzogchen, and then Ning Tik. Ning means heart, and Tik often is translated as essence, sometimes as, in this case, essence. So this phrase heart essence is well known in Tibet. And there are numerous heart essence lineage traditions of Dzogchen in Tibet. The main one that we have connected with, it so happens that I've studied with teachers quite closely and personally and wonderfully enrichedly with and read texts from 3 of the 5 traditions within Tibet. One of them, of course, is Nyingma, which is the one that, when you practice, we need to have a coherent, cohesive transmission. So most of our orientation is toward Nyingma, and within Nyingma, the heart essence Dzogchen traditions. But we bring in what we've learned from other traditions. So Nyingtik, there's the Pema Nyingtik associated with Guru Rinpoche. You don't have to memorize these names. I'm just trying to give you an idea of kind of the tapestry that we are pulling threads from. And then there is the Bhima Nyingtik, Vimalamitra, a very great figure from about Guru Rinpoche's time. Adzam Rinpoche is considered an incarnation of Vimalamitra. And his work is important, so there's that Nyingtik. Then there is the Khandro Nyingtik, which is associated with Longchenpa. There is, above all, for us, the Longchen Nyingtik, heart essence, vast expanse. Our foundational practices that we do, various teachings, the refuge and bodhicitta that we sing are from Jigme Lingpa. Adzam Rinpoche is considered a reincarnation of Jigme Lingpa. Jigme Lingpa, and then, so Guru Rinpoche in about the 8th century, according to traditional chronologies, Vimalamitra about the same time, Longchenpa in the 14th century, Jigme Lingpa in the 18th century, Adzam Trukpa, very significant in bringing heart essence, vast expanse, the Longchen Nyingtik, into the 20th century, and he was the father, as I mentioned, of our own Adzam Pela Rinpoche and Jatsul in their previous lifetime. So what am I saying? Am I saying if you don't believe in past lives, this won't make any sense to you? No, I think at the very least we can understand that energetically speaking, and in the way that we hold these traditions, we feel very, very connected to them because we know Rinpoche, and he is, whatever this might mean to us symbolically, or feel that it's literally true, he has a profound connection with all of these Dzogchen lineages, with the Longchen Nyingtik and the others that I mentioned. And he also has his own lineage called the Usel Nyingtik, the luminous Usel, we just call it, or the luminous heart drop, luminous
heart essence
lineage. And these are his treasures that he discovered, that he will reveal to him in his own mind, and that we are now including in our program. It was always our intention and hope that we would be able to include it, but we couldn't do it until he said we could. And now, just in the nick of time, we were able, because communication, as Jatsul indicated, is not so easy, but we were auspiciously enough able to actually talk to him by phone and also communicate to him a bit via her after quite a long period of not having any communication. And so he even added on what we should include beyond what we initially were thinking. So we are just thrilled, really deeply honored, delighted, yay, all across the spectrum, that this will be part of our program. So in Tibetan, so you heard Jatsul use the word Dzogchen Nyingtik. And Dzogchen Nyingtik, we can add Korlo, which means cycles, which is our word. So for short, in English, we're calling this program Dzogchen Cycles. It is centered on the Longchen Nyingtik, Heart Essence, Vast Expanse, which is a full path from beginning to end. It is the most, I have heard, the most widely practiced Dzogchen lineage in Tibet. There certainly are others which are wonderful. And we are very much in a non-sectarian spirit. In praising this, we are not unpraising others. But you have to focus, especially in the Tibetan tradition. There's this constellation of dazzling things over here and this amazing galaxy over here. And honestly, I know a lot of people who hop from one to the other, and they're always sort of high, but they're not getting a coherent path. And this is that means a stages of the path, moving through the stages. I mean, you wouldn't go to, you wouldn't take algebra if you didn't know the multiplication table. I don't think, even now, right? They're not doing that. There are stages of practice. We understand this when it comes to our own education, and somehow, often, at least in this culture, the teaching gets unmoored from any kind of actually logical sequencing, and people just, a teacher appears here, and they go and do this, and they go and do that. And that can be great as long as you know where to put things. So we all, our teachers, and we after them, are really very emphatic that we proceed in a way that will actually build skills and build possibility for us. So that's why we call it the Dzogchen Cycles. Now, in fact, our Tuesday evenings, our first and third Tuesdays this fall and next spring, we're calling prequels, because they will actually be helpful in supporting the Dzogchen Cycles program. The Dzogchen Cycles program itself begins with our week-long retreat in May. It's May 5th through May 12th, as Harvey said. And this, what we're going to do in this particular retreat is the 7 trainings of Longchenpa. Longchen Ropcham, 14th century, considered the greatest of the greatest, really, of Nyingma philosophers and practitioners. Longchen Ropcham wrote this. It's a very short text, actually, that is the foundation for Dzogchen practice. Interestingly enough, he includes it in his very, very esoteric collections of texts, known as the, what do we call them, the Nyingtik Yapshi. And we can tell where he put actually in the collection of his writings about Vimalamitra. The point is that this is a text that is explicitly opening the way and actually including in itself the Dzogchen teachings. And Adzum Rinpoche taught it twice. He taught it once on Whidbey Island, I think his last year here in 2007 or 6, I'm not sure. And then he taught it once in Germany. And he told me to teach it because he said, it is, if somebody has this as an entryway, as a training ground, he says, I'll sign my name to it. He would say that once in a while, very dramatically, I'll sign my name to it. You will do well. You will really move forth in a good way. And indeed, we use it with the commentary of Jigme Lingpa, which has just come out in English. I've had it, thanks to Cortland Dahl, for a number of years, and whenever I've taught the 7 trainings, I have used it. And now you will be able to read it in English, and we are also gathering Rinpoche's own oral commentary on this. And so the thing about it is, what Jigme Lingpa makes very clear in his discussion of this, he uses stories. He uses little dramas that we kind of use our imagination around, and in the process learn a lot about ourselves, which is, of course, the purpose of any teaching, really, to, I think, as, what's his name? Suzuki Roshi famously said, to study Buddhism is to study the self, and to realize that what we thought was self, I'll add, and to realize that what we thought was self is not what we thought it was. But that's what we learn when we study the self. So always our intention as practitioners is to learn about ourselves, to see what's going on, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And that's why we need friends, by the way, to hold our hands and to say it's all right when we start seeing, there's some rotten stuff in Denmark. and when it comes out, it can be really hard. And we need friends. We need spiritual friends, not just people to drink off our anxiety with, but really to look at it and grow from it and shed it finally. So one thing that is very clear from the way Jime Lingbe uses these stories is that in doing these 7 trainings, in each of the trainings, we are moving from the sutra phase of practice through tantra and to Dzogchen itself. And in fact, the 7th training contains elements that are central to the famous and esoteric and usually very hidden practices of Dzalung, the training in the channels and winds, which is another way of training the body. Once we've figured out that we have a body finally, as Westerners, there's really a lot to train as we get in touch with more subtle aspects of the body. So all of that is in these 7 trainings of Longchenpa. That's our first retreat. Now, alongside of that, and very complementary to it, there is something that I've been calling seeing to being. So in 2000, which is really a framework for everything. It is something which includes everything. So in 2002, I was able to visit Adzom Gar, which is in Sichuan. When Rinpoche was there, I think it was the last time he spent any amount of time there, because now he's inside Tibet itself. In any case, I think that's where our conversation began, and he gave me 4 very, very simple principles. It was kind of like, here are some seeds. And I thought about them for a while, a long time actually. And then in 2007 at Samye Chimpuk, and also in the last few years when I've been able to go to China, I told him, I started teaching it, some of what I've taught here and in California and Portland and Olympia, and actually in Switzerland also, have been elements from this. So you have seen some of it already. It's really simple. He identifies 4 faculties that we already have, as I've mentioned before, and then I have, inspired by various things that he has said and just putting together things in different ways, organized these into 4 stages of seeing. So he says seeing, everybody knows how to see in some sense. Everybody knows, so in other words, using our senses. And once we see things, once we actually have a capacity for paying attention, so that within the category of seeing, this first phase of these practices, all of our attentional practices are included. We've done some of them already, focusing, open attention, being part of a field, connecting with your body in the process of paying attention. All of this is part of what is meant by seeing here. It's actually quite rich already. But once we can see, then we get curious. What's this? Look at it more closely. Especially, what's this? Who am I? What's going on? So there's seeing, seeking, and as we look into things, we realize that things aren't as, just like ice can melt. Really anything that we look at turns out to have an interior structure that can open up and show much more space in the situation than we ever thought was possible. And so this fires our imagination. We use our imagination, much as we do in Tantra also, using our imagination, our vision. And like a river flowing to an ocean, very naturally, we move through this process of engaging through each of these stages has different levels of practices, seeing, seeking, vision, and just naturally we land in being, which is the heart and soul of Dzogchen, which is actually a state and orientation that underlies the entirety of the path. This is something that becomes very clear in our practice of the 7 trainings. As I said, Jigme Lingpa takes us in each of them through really all of the stages of the path, and we see that everything, sometimes the stages of the path are pictured and imagined as a kind of ladder or a hierarchy, and we climb up the ladder from Sutra to Tantra to Dzogchen. But really, my experience and interpretation, and I find this very reinforced by Jigme Lingpa, is that really what we see is that Dzogchen, our being, our state of being, our real nature that nothing could ever change or taint, is present in everything. It backlights the entire path. It's not something that we claw our way towards. It's something that we open towards through the different practices that we do. So for that reason, seeing, so to speak, flows into being. It's a natural, maybe better than a river, I could use the metaphor of a waterfall. If we just follow the path, we will come to this ocean of being that we already are. Rinpoche's name for this is, one of his names for it in Tibetan is Semnyu Rangdrol, which literally means something like my nature freeing everything, or naturally freeing. It's a very Dzogchen phrase. One of Longchenpa's greatest works has this very same title. So imagine my surprise when Rinpoche said, that's what this is. That actually was a teaching for me to understand how all-encompassing this very simple set of principles that he gave me, in which I've developed, and then as I developed them, I ran them by him, and to my amazement and delight, he was like, yeah, okay, and where do we go from here? It was like he was right away, right with it. So that is our first retreat.
So sweet. Let me say something.
Please.
So I just put a few very short addenda onto what Anne added. One is that we really all have grown up in a book culture in this society, and we think of knowledge as formulated on the pages of a book or on the outlines of a blackboard. And actually instruction in Tibet, and in particular in the Dzogchen tradition, the practice traditions, is very, very different, and it relies on what are called oral quintessential instructions. And quintessential means like really, condensed, very, very powerful. And it's good that Anne sort of just said that the name of the teachings, because really what Rinpoche offered her was 4 quintessential instructions. And the nature of these quintessential instructions is that for us as students, we take them in, but we continue to contemplate them. There really are like zip drives that have a kind of infinite capacity for opening. So even the name Semnyi Rangdol, it's got 4 syllables. The first 2, Semnyi is nature of mind. And the second 2, Rang is a kind of interesting word. It can mean natural, it can mean self, and Drol means liberate. Anne actually just translated it one way. I tend to think of it another way, but that's just the richness of the phrase, because Rangdol can refer to sort of and this is pretty much true of some very, very profound things in general in Tibetan practice, can talk about kind of the path is a path of natural liberation. You're naturally liberating into the mind nature, but it's also the mind nature itself that is naturally liberating us. So it's both, in a way, an effect of our practice. It's very natural to liberate into the mind nature, but also it's actually very natural for our mind nature to liberate us. And, we think we're doing a lot of work and la-di-da-di-da, but from a certain profound perspective, our mind nature is just liberating us. We're not actually doing anything. So it's just to say, even something short, most of these quintessential instructions tend to be quite brief, very pithy, but they have a lot of depth and can be a source of amazing over and over reflection. The other thing, and it's hard to really say this in a way, hard to describe it, but I do think it's pretty unusual. We've seen a lot of sanghas, we've seen a lot of teachers, and it's very, very usual for wise Tibetan teachers to dispense knowledge. It just is. They are fonts of knowledge, and then the students imbibe the knowledge. It's a little bit really unusual for someone as vastly, notoriously talented as Adzom Rinpoche to sit down and collegially work with a woman. Really.
Well, a student, any student.
But a woman and a student. And so this speaks to a particular relationship that Anne has with Adzom Rinpoche, and there's backstory to that which we won't address right now, but it really is unusual to hear about this collegial relationship, and that this Semyi Rangdol, mind nature, naturally liberating, arises from this collegial relationship. It's quite a blessing. And, Anne does not toot her own horn, but there is a kind of historic and religiously significant aspect to that collaboration that just needs to be kind of underlined and put into bold print.
So now we come, I think, to the what.
Well, that was
right?
part of the what.
That was
the
part
first
of the
retreat.
what. That's the first part of the what. So that's our first retreat. We can't wait. And we want to tell you now succinctly, because we want to have time to actually talk to you and hear what you're hearing and what questions you have about the program itself and its unique features and its benefits. You will find on our Dzogchen Cycles landing page the actual outline of the schedule. And
at least for the first year.
The first year, the second 2 years, we're rearranging right now a little bit because they're going to include some of Rinpoche's own tear, and they will be up, I think, within 2 weeks, maybe sooner. You'll be able to see that. But just some highlights. I think I'll be very brief about this because we want to, one of the most unique things about the program, well, there's two unique things about the program. There's the program itself, what we're teaching, and then there's the structure of the program, which Harvey's going to talk about. I think we can do that pretty swiftly, and then we can hear your questions. So you've heard about the first retreat, which is in May. Then generally the pattern for this program for the 3 years is that there will be a week-long retreat, probably usually around the first week of May. There will be a fall and a spring weekend retreats. For those of you who don't live in Houston, you can do this online, but for all the reasons that Harvey has said already about the importance of Sangha and community, we're not just trying to dispense teachings. Actually, we're really seeking to hold and encourage and nurture and celebrate and enjoy a community of practitioners. So we do ask that those of you who come into the program that you come once a year if you possibly can. so that we'll know you. And you will also, as Harvey will talk about, get a friend, a spiritual friend who's a longtime student who can, kind of help you and support you in your practice.
Let me just say one thing, dear.
Okay.
So it definitely is possible to get a transmission via video, via long distance with great spiritual teachers and with great spiritual teachings. The blessing power of the teaching stream itself can be conveyed. But I recently read a wonderful little snippet in a Dzogchen Tantra where it said that geese provide quintessential instructions to one another through beating their wings near one another. And this is a kind of quintessential instruction. And it really speaks to the fact that when we are in a community with one another, not only are teachers providing blessings vertically, but as geese, just by being in a space one with another, we are providing quintessential support and energetic support for realization with one another. It's tremendously meaningful, quintessential instruction to contemplate. Okay.
So we do want to have some in-person contact as part of this. Our fall retreat will be a short practice for accomplishing Guru Rinpoche from Rinpoche's own, our own Adzon Rinpoche's Ösel Nyingtik. He just handed it to me one day. And so he has encouraged us to include it here. We haven't taught it before, but once we do it, it is imbued with, it's a Dzogchen teaching itself. However, these texts are beautiful and simple and exquisite in that everybody will understand it at different levels. If you have a Dzogchen orientation already, you will understand something. If you don't, you will understand something. It's quite short. And then we can also use this to celebrate the 10th day. In Nyingma tradition, the lunar 10th is Guru Rinpoche Day. And we have not been celebrating it because we never quite had a text. So we will be able to do that. And then in the winter, our Losar retreat, we will do the Luchen, the body offering, or Je practice from Jigme Lingpa's own Ngondro. This is very famous, and it's hardly ever taught, as far as I can tell. And when we mentioned this to Rinpoche, he said, do mine too. So we will teach it with, he has done a compilation of it, which includes some other prayers and so on. So that's, I guess, February-ish 2018. And there will also, I think in the second year, we will also include the Yeshe Tsogel from Rinpoche's own Ösel Nyingtik transmission. And a few people have tasted that, but it hasn't been made available until now. He has said now is the time. And this is just an exquisite practice.
Yeah, so that teaching...
It's a Dakini practice.
The Dakini treasure will be part of the week-long retreat in the second year, which will also include...
the second year, that's right.
Teachings on Tara. But
so that's our Dakini week-long with green Tara.
Anybody who's really participated in that has been very, very touched and influenced. It's just very, very significant treasure. But I think then we're going to move on to
let's move
program.
on. Yeah.
So what is unique and what are the benefits of this program? This program is going to include our first and third Tuesday evening teachings and our retreats, and these will continue to be open to all interested and sincere practitioners. The program is really meant for people who hope to be able to commit some significant amount of time to daily practice according each to every person's individual consideration. And that will be slightly different for everyone. And in addition, the program as a program, in addition to the Tuesday evening teachings and to the retreats per se, people in the program will have a mentor assigned to them who will be able to consult with individuals about their practice. There'll be a live webinar open only to program participants with the two of us every 6 to 8 weeks. There will be a once a month live facilitated web support discussion group only open to program participants. There'll be a listserv dedicated to participants in the program. And then once a year, people who are in the program will meet with either Anne or myself personally or by Skype, depending on what the logistics are. And how this will benefit individuals, that people will be able to fine-tune their practice and their questions through meeting with their teachers and their spiritual friends.
And we are having a concurrent training program for the spiritual friends. These are longtime students who we know well, who we have invited to be part of that. And we just had our first training on Saturday. So they will be getting training in how to work with you. And if anything naughty comes up, they will also talk with us. So we're trying to have a real holding practice. If you really practice, it's not always easy going. And so we've done all of these infrastructure, a lot of discussion with a lot of important input from Claire, actually a program director too, so that we want to offer those of you who are committing, we are also committing to provide a holding and a structure to support you.
And we really are looking to create an online and in-person practice community that in some senses transcends the limitations of physical location. So yes, our spiritual friends are in ongoing training with us, and as of now, we'll probably be able to accommodate somewhere between 50 to 80 participants in the program. And so others who can't be in the program can still participate in our Tuesday nights, can participate in our retreats, but we won't be able to provide the level of support to everybody that we just enumerated, and so those who aren't enrolled in the program won't be able to have that level of support. We will have a waiting list if we do fill up.
So I think we want to encourage you, if you go online, you will see that there is an application form and that we ask for it to be turned in sometime in February. But we've already had five. And so the places are limited. And once we have a bunch, we'll start looking at them, I think. So if you know that you would like to do this, please do send in the application form, because then we'll know that you'd like to do it also. And if you're accepted but we don't have an actual place for you, then you can still attend, but you won't have the infrastructure of the group until and unless a place opens up. Okay.
And we're asking for the applications by February 28th, 2017.
But
sooner
there's
is
no
better.
penalty for sending them in early. As I've been telling my Rice students forever, right? Didn't all your college teachers say that?
But at this point, we're ready to
all right,
entertain
so
questions. Any questions?
What
whatsoever.
have we said that is not clear, or that you'd like to hear more about, or have doubts
we're
about?
certainly open to people at a distance asking questions on some sort of chat line.
Okay, Karen. She's a good icebreaker.
Well, I have to say this is so rich, and I feel like we're just blessed to be part of those being present on the planet at a time when this is being offered by you
I
and being
feel
in
that way.
Houston. So I can't tell you from the depths of my heart how grateful I am to be here. I do have a logistical question, and I'm not sure it's relevant to everybody, but for those of us who are starting the whole Nundro program, can we do both?
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right.
The people who are doing, so just, we have a beta version of an online Ngondro foundational practice program that some people are doing that we are trying out. And once we get the kinks out of it, it will be more widely available. Our assumption was that people who wanted to do the foundational practices would want to do the cycles, and that will enrich the cycles, and we will, in terms of it's something that, here's where the individual tweaking comes in, right? So if you want to do the foundational practices and are doing them, then that will determine something about how you spend your daily practice time. But it won't exclude being involved in these practices, certainly not.
In fact, we see the two programs as very, very mutually supportive of one another, but there is a logistical issue in terms of time for those people who are doing what are called the foundational practices, and everybody will learn a little bit more about those as time goes on. There needs to be some prioritization in terms of what you do every day, but there's going to be a lot of theoretical information that will be very, very useful for enlivening the foundational practices and what we're doing.
Okay, thank you. That was my. I was listening to
You
the
didn't
program.
think we were going to set you up for a clash, did you?
I didn't think so, but I had to be sure.
No, that's
Thank
good.
you. Thank you. I'm glad you brought it up. What else? Maybe we've kind of laid out a fair bit. If you want anything repeated, that's also fine. Yes.
Are there prerequisites we should know about to participate?
Not really. I mean, the reason we have an application, it's more about, we want to know a little bit about who you are. The application asks you to tell us a little bit about your background in practice, but it's not because you have to have done certain things in order to get in. It's just we want to know you and also know a little bit, understand a little bit about your motivation and, why you want to do it, and that will help make sense to us and so on. Yeah. So maybe I should say, so we feel that this program is both a way for people who are relatively new but ready to be serious. Everybody's different. Some people take a long time to get serious in the sense of, I think we're definitely going to ask you to commit to daily practice. And how much exactly is actually something we're going to talk about quite a lot in the beginning of the year, because one of the big challenges people face is, I'm not practicing enough, and how to work that out. So we think this is a good place to start, and if you've been practicing for a long time, it's also wonderful. One thing I forgot to say is that, so we have selected, out of all the zillions of practices that there are, we have organized this and really based it on teachings that Adzun Rinpoche has given over the last 15 years or so. So we are, supporting many of these things, except for his tear, are things that he has
Treasures.
taught. Treasures are things that he has taught, but most of them, I don't think there's anybody who's kept up, or very few people who have kept up all of the things that he has taught while he has, so we're kind of revisiting them. Sorry.
But
Yes,
also
go
including these treasures.
Yeah.
Is this Dzogchen meditation particularly in one direction? Like, is it very tantric or very, I don't know, very like focused on like shamatha kind of thing? Or is it like a mix of practices?
It actually, all of the things that you have named are very important skills for Dzogchen. So our teacher Ketsun Samba would say that Dzogchen practitioner's best friend is Tantra. So we are doing some tantric practices, the Tara, the Yeshe Tsogel. We will be doing quite a bit of Tantra practices. And they are as we understand more about the Dzogchen view, there is a way of understanding those from a tantric perspective, which we will learn about. That's part of our very important part, especially I think of the second year, to learn about Tantra. And Dzogchen itself is much simpler than Tantra. It is a form of shamatha, but it's different from sutra shamatha. So it's a great completeness. All of these things that we practice, shamatha, tantra, all of this is very helpful for a Dzogchen practitioner. Dzogchen itself is much simpler than any of those things.
And I would maybe complement what she's saying by saying that some of the seemingly tantric practices are taught from within what's called the Dzogchen view, and it is the case that it's not Tantra and or Dzogchen. It's ultimately those two views are non-dual, and so it would create a bit of a misimpression to think that there's tantric practice. I mean, sometimes there is tantric practice leading to a Dzogchen sort of realization, but for example, the Yeshe Tsogyal is through and through embedded in a Dzogchen view, though some of the way of practicing seems to also have tantric elements. So this may not make any sense right now, but it's important to understand that it's a bit of a limitation to think of some of the things that we're doing as either Tantra or Dzogchen, because ultimately they interpenetrate. And the teachings are given in such a way as to further that understanding of interpenetration.
And that's exactly what I meant when I earlier used the metaphor of saying that all of the teachings, Sutra and Tantra, are backlit by Dzogchen. They're all suffused. If one is capable, they're suffused with the Dzogchen view. And even if they're not, because you haven't had the Dzogchen view yet, it's in there. And at some point will be recognized as present there. Does that help you? It's a great question, actually.
Just made me curious.
Good.
Good. Here's
It
a
is
question.
curious.
Question
Okay.
by the computer.
Really?
Don't fall.
Thank you, Gary.
There are many questions from the
Oh,
computer.
hi, everybody.
So first of all, let's see. So Daniel Donner asks, how many spiritual friends are there going to be?
Good question. That's a kind of moving target.
Right now we have about, I think, 14. There might be a couple of people. There might be a few more. So that's what limits the number of people that we can actually admit into the program as such, because we can't overload any of those people, because they also have families and responsibilities.
Another question from abroad is, are there daily time requirements? This is from Peggy. Are there daily time requirements for practice? And she doesn't say this, but what might those look like?
So the Harvey and I,
TBD. In conversation between mentor and student.
to be discussed, and we will also give guidelines for this discussion. Hi, Peggy. So we decided that we are not going to say X amount everybody has to do, because people's lives are different. What we're going to be looking for, and some people like you have other practice commitments, which we are certainly want you to continue to honor. So it's going to be quite individual. But what we want is for everyone to really reflect on your life and your time, and with the help of your spiritual, your practice friend, your mentoring friend, and us, because we'll discuss it as a community also. It's a big issue for everyone to come up with something that you can commit to, that's really something that you can do, and not just nothing. I mean, not just something that you can do that's meaningful, and meaningful in the context of your practice life. I hope that helps.
So Diana Roberts asks, how will you decide whom you will accept?
It's going to be hard, maybe. I guess by some sense of you that we get by reading what you've written, that we feel, oh, this makes sense for this person at this time. And also, probably will want to have some kind of balance between longtime students and newer students. We haven't really talked about that yet, but I think probably we will. People who are longtime students of Adzon Rinpoche, you know, Jatsul said she's glad that we're doing this for you, so I guess that will be a factor too. And yeah, that's where we are with that. And again, there will be a waiting, if we fill up, there will be a waiting list, and things may shift. We may get more mentors.
And to reiterate that there's the program, but the teachings on Tuesday nights and the retreats will be open as before.
Once you've come through the application if you are accepted, then you can attend, but you may not be in the program. That makes sense? Because even for the retreats, we want some container for them.
That actually relates to another question. This one I think is from Karen Burry. She asks, so what's the difference between like being accepted and doing the program as a Dzogchen Cycles student and just watching, you know, the Tuesday night teachings and coming to retreats? Can you tell us what the difference is?
Yes, the difference is the amount of personal interaction that you will get. And of course, some people might feel, great, I don't really want personal interaction.
So just to reiterate, the
but
program...
in our view, it's a very significant
The program
gift.
includes a spiritual friend who a person will be able to be in contact with, probably to the tune of once a month, whether it be on phone or by email. It will include a live webinar, which will not be open to the general public, about every 6 to 8 weeks with Harvey and Ann, where the participants in the program will get some teachings, follow-up teachings, and be able to ask questions. Participants in the program will have a live facilitated support discussion group once a month. The participants in the program will have a listserv accessible to them, limited to the participants in the program, and the participants in the program will have once a year personal meeting with Harvey and Ann. That distinguishes the program from just people who are doing our Tuesday nights and who are coming to the retreats, having applied, made an application even to come to the retreats, because we want to have some container on who comes to the retreats.
And I guess our implicit expectation is that if you are admitted to the program and you are part of the program, that you will attend everything, you know, maybe on your own time, because everything will be available online, because you're occupying a place, and if not, then somebody else could take your place. So, yeah, right?
Another question?
Yes, another question. Freedy Ann asks, is the program appropriate for a beginner in Buddhist practice but with some knowledge of the tradition?
Yes.
Yes. And enthusiastic. We want to have some, quote, beginners. And we want to, you know, we'd love to hear on your application where you got your understanding from, you know, who you studied with, and what books you've read, that kind of thing. But yes, we're starting with the best beginning. What Adzon Rinpoche will sign is the best way to begin. So we'd love to have some, some newer people too. It's important, actually.
Then?
Because we're a field. As a community of practitioners, we become a field. You want different colored flowers and old trees and fresh flowers. Really, it's really true. We want different energies in the field.
And old geese's wings will help the younger geese's wings. Is there another question?
Okay, thank you for those
Any
questions.
questions here?
Something else? Mark?
Mark?
think you sort of answered my question, which was similar to the last question. I feel like I've been splashing around in the shallow end, and I don't really know much. And so I was just, wondering if this would be appropriate for someone who's not very knowledgeable, but very interested in expanding their knowledge.
We're looking for interest, enthusiasm, a willingness to commit to the process. It's really not about prior learning can certainly be helpful if it's there, but that's not, I would say, the central thing. The curiosity, the willingness to see what's going on, I think. Do you want to say anything about that?
That we wanted to, we see it as a kind of multi-layered, it's both making known critical, basic information about Buddhist practice and adding crunch to that material. And we've sort of figured out a way to do that over the years. So there'll be readings that people who really want to go deeper into things can really get to. We will also be making things as applicable to everyday life as possible. And some of the material will be introductory, but some of it will have some bones to it. But it is definitely for people who are very interested and would like some structured learning to introduce them to the path.
And it's really an education. So one thing I wanted to say, this is study and practice. So we are going to be looking slowly at a digestible pace at some texts also that are hardly ever taught, actually, but are foundational. For example, some of us heard Tuku Jigme speak about Nagarjuna's praise of the Dharmadhatu. Well, that's an amazing, simple, and very profound way of understanding Buddha nature, this Buddha nature business that I was talking about earlier. The third, Karmapa, has written a commentary on it, which is available in English. It's great. We'll be reading Maitreya Asanga's Buddha Nature. It's translated as Buddha Nature. Again, to get more background, sort of cognitive background. So it's both cognitive and experiential learning is what we're seeking to offer. Because, we're Western, we're all educated people. Things have to make sense to us, I think, cognitively to some degree, before we can really say, okay, I'm going to, give up daily, every day to this project. I think it's helpful to understand it cognitively. And there's some wonderful texts that Anila liked so much, she's going to collect them. So we're feeling good about the fact that there's a certain kind of, Buddhist education, or maybe I could say human education about human beings that is available in these books. It's not like you have to read them, but they're available, and we will talk about them, and you will learn something about the body of, literature that contributes to these practices.
And actually, in terms of what we will be covering in a particular programmatic way, we will be doing an introduction to the Dzogchen and Tantric worldview, but we will also be, over the course of time, reviewing and teaching what are called the six perfections, which are very, very foundational Mahayana teachings. And we'll also be dealing with issues of motivation and self-confidence in practice. So it really is a very, very both basic and very advanced. It's kind of like Dzogchen. We're having things at multiple layers. I think even the first retreat, which includes Longchenpa's teachings, is emblematic of the way we're seeing things, which includes everything from the most basic motivation to practice to, in that very, very short text, he covers actually pretty much all the layers of the profound, different kind of tantric practices and Dzogchen in a very, very succinct manner.
That's a
Yes, so I pretty much like absolutely everything I've heard, but then I think about the retreat, May 5 through the 12th of 2017. Will there be a logistical solution for those of us that need to work Monday through Friday?
We'll have to
Eight
have
to
a
five.
logistical solution.
Well, the material
will
will be taped, and so it can be watched. I mean, we know there will always be exceptions, but we're trying to encourage people to attend as much as possible.
You know, even if it's possible to take off one day, so you can at least do 3 days instead of, have a 4-day work week instead of a 5-day work week. But as we said, we're committed to working on a program that works for people who work, and so I guess you can't close down school, right? So I'd say that's not a make or break it. Then, and you're in Houston, hopefully you'll be able to attend in person more the other weekends, and if you want to do the program. So, we're going to work with you, but we're also going to make clear what we think is optimum.
And we want all our friends in South America and Mexico to come.
And some of at least of our mentors so far are fluent in Spanish.
What about the Russians?
We don't have a Russian, and we have some.
Do we have some Russians listening?
German-speaking mentors as well, just so you know.
Okay, good.
Bhutanese,
Well,
really.
we welcome our Russian and Bhutanese friends.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully after 3 years we'll have more mentors, and then, this will grow. We see this as continuing, by the way. It's not, but we don't have to talk about that now. Yes.
Pragmatic question. So this rich, wonderful opportunity we have, there must be a price, a cost, a tuition. And has that been talked about yet? Do we have any idea?
I don't think we've talked about it. It's on our website in detail.
Okay.
And there's actually 3 layers of pricing, depending on your means. And there's also a statement that the cost is not the issue. I mean, as an organization, we have to be financially wise in some way. But if you're somebody who, I have to do this program and I can't pay, or I can't pay fully, talk to us. Sometimes people don't talk to us, and it's terrible to discover later that somebody who really wanted to do a program didn't even talk to us about it. We hope to begin a scholarship fund, which you don't quite have yet, but as Sharon has pointed out, there are people who willingly pay the top price in order to be able to help us admit people who, don't. So I forget the details. Mary Scott has worked them out quite carefully, and it's all on our landing page, the cost of the retreat. And you can work out, you can do it monthly or quarterly, or I think she's got a couple different plans.
Claire's looking
to
them
help
up
you
as
do
we
it.
speak.
Okay. For those of you who don't know, Mary Scott is the executive director at Dawn Mountain, and our Claire is program director. So she has borne a lot of the weight of this organization, and it is she who has figured out how to do all these technical things.
Well, along
Gary.
with Gary.
Well, Gary is the guru for everything technical at Dawn Mountain.
Anybody else want the mic?
Any other comments or questions? Or it's actually very helpful to us to know what you might be puzzled about or concerned about. So please feel free. The people in Bhutan, once Jatsul actually has collected these materials in Tibetan. If you read Tibetan, you can have them. A lot of them are PDFs. Actually, if you are a Tibetan-speaking person and would like these texts in Tibetan, you can get them. You can get them, or we can get them often from the TBRC, you know, the website there. Anyway, we'd be very happy for you to have them, especially in Bhutan. Go ahead, yes.
This question is since I've only been here maybe 4 times and I've watched a lot online, so
Hi.
I'm particularly intrigued about the connection to the body. And you when you mentioned just the strange difference in being in Tibet and the land, and then you mentioned horses and cars. And honestly, I was curious what your experience with the horses was. Did you have to, when you were in Tibet, did you have to ride up and down the hills? It means a lot to me.
So, why does it mean a lot to you?
Because of my own connection with the body and horses. So,
I don't have much experience. There were a couple occasions when we rode horses in Tibet. We couldn't have made it up to Shuksep on Igompa. We were 11 women and I think 2 horses. So we traded, you know, but oh man, that was a hard walk. But I was mostly, and I think I rode one other time in Tibet. It wasn't something really did a lot, but it was more like, you know, in riding or in walking, you know, your body is involved in a way that it's just not when you're in a car. And there's a sense of connection to the land. I feel when I see Native Americans walk, or even films of Native Americans or Native peoples, you know, they walk on land like they're talking to somebody. You know, there's something really, I see you get it totally, right? There's a communication. We walk on land like we don't want to pay any attention to it at all because what's inside our head or our, yes, exactly, is much more interesting. So that's the kind of thing. Yeah.
There she is. Hot off the press.
Okay, so I have the webpage that talks about fees up right now. So first of all, if you're going to do Dzogchen Cycles, you will need to be a member of Dawn Mountain. And so if you do our $40 a month basic membership fee, so that adds up to $480 a year, but obviously you can break that down. And again, if there's financial difficulty, we can work with you on that. And then the annual Cycles program tuition. So this includes all the extra stuff that you get on top of the Teaching Tuesdays and the retreats. You can choose your level of starting at $600 a year, $800 or $1,000. And again, we can work with you on that, but that's for the whole year's worth of extra add-on stuff and for your mentor as well.
And the retreats.
Oh, that includes the retreats?
Yes, it includes the retreats.
Daggum, you cannot get a better deal.
Yes. It includes the retreat prices and
I think it's a little more, Karen was asking about, I think it's, the retreats will cost more for people who aren't in the program. Is that true?
I don't know.
I'm not sure.
I can't say.
Okay, we'll see. I don't remember.
Anything else?
Since I have the microphone,
Yes.
I would just like to say how grateful I am for all the hours that y'all put into this and for making this available here in the West. I mean, for those of y'all who like have been involved with Dawn Mountain or with Tibetan Buddhism for a long time, you probably know how amazing this is. But if you don't know how amazing this is, you probably already feel it in the room. But if you don't, I'm just going to say this is like so amazing. I mean, it's really like there are hardly any outlets in the Western English-speaking world to be able to get this kind of instruction, and especially to get it from teachers of this quality. Anne and Harvey are very humble, but like, I mean, I remember going to India and telling somebody I studied with Anne, and her jaw just dropped. She was from like Europe somewhere. I was like, whoa, I guess my teacher's kind of a big deal. So I just want to say that because it feels like a historical moment in our progress as Dawn Mountain.
It is a historic moment.
That's true. Yeah, thank you.
It's actually a strange position to be up here as a teacher, and we do have something quite unique and gifted to offer. It's hard as a person who is embodying all of that to say that without seeming weird, but
well, we don't want to stay much longer. We want to dedicate, but I do need to say that one of the really great things that we bring to this is Harvey's many, many years as a psychotherapist. And it's not that practice is or isn't psychotherapy, but his ability, which is also how we're training the people in the program who are training to be mentoring friends, you know, to be sensitive to, for example, self-hatred, which Harvey often describes as the common cold of mental health. It just doesn't work that way in Asia. I'm not saying they have their own issues, but you know, we have certain kinds of snarls that we get into that are extremely painful. And I've been there, he's been there, a lot of you have been there, you know, and you can hope to get there because it's actually part of the process of really opening up. But it's very helpful to have someone who, and to have a community, because we're educating the whole community in this regard, that understands what these things are, you know. You're jealous of, you know, somebody who's attracting your partner's attention. Well, the monks, you know, they talk about not being jealous, but, you know, they're not in this kind of situation, these kinds of dicey personal situations that we get into. So it's just a great wealth of compassionate holding, really, that comes through in particularly what Harvey brings to this whole embrace of community. Do you want to say anything about that?
Well, just that
10 or 4.
over the years I've kind of specialized in working with people with spiritual issues, and ranging from Hindus, Catholics, Buddhists, Christians. And I think it's important. I mean, I've been very, very respectful of everybody's individual spiritual engagement. And I think it's helpful to have done that and recognize that, you know, we are humans, we have human issues, I'm human, I have my issues. But to be able to, often things get reductionistic, or historically people would get reductionistic, you know, where people would convert spiritual issues into psychological. It's important to be able to honor our spiritual endeavor and recognize that we also have some very, very specific psychological and emotional issues that can intermix in incredibly complicated ways. That it's pretty darn important to be able to have a kind of vast view and a fair bit of experience to be able to honor everything that can come up in people's spiritual practice, and then support people in a very sensitive way. And I think we've got that capacity and that history, and it is, I think, a fairly unusual contribution that we have to offer. And we're very happy to offer it and hopefully help people with it.
And lay down tracks for these practices, continuing in a genuinely helpful way in our culture. It's really what we hope for you and your friends and your family, and then maybe some of you will help pass it on as well.
I was actually very happy to talk with Anila, and she was talking about all these wives who come to talk to her in China about their issues, and we were kind of able to exchange professional notes from her situation and that cultural milieu, which has its own specific pieces to it, but you know, the way she was dealing with it and some ideas that I had. So it was great to hear some of that and to talk about it. But it's kind of time.
Okay, so we'll get the book.
We'll
If there's anyone you have not written down, you can always say the name. Thank you so much. Okay, so we'll just do would you like the candle when we get to it? So where do we start?
So what
Tuesday,
should we do, dear?
okay. I have to write down my people. Just, I think, the short prayer. I think we should do Adzun Rinpoche's long life prayer, though, since this is...
good English copy of something. So we will do what, the short sharing merit here?
Yeah.
We'll do the short sharing merit, we'll do Atsum Rinpoche's prayer, and then we'll do the prayer of the candle, which I don't have handy. Can somebody get me a sheet?
I know it, I think.
Thank you so much.
Okay. So
Okay.
this is all of the merit of all of our good intentions that we've all had this evening, a certain kind of blessed energy, and now we're sharing it with everyone.
By this good may I swiftly once become a great guru, lead all beings, everyone, to reach to that very ground. The long life prayer for Atsum Rinpoche. Om Swasti. Flawless refuge sources give blessings, teacher, protector, kind Dharma Lord. Jorme Tupten Jatsul wondrous good, lotus feet ever deed everywhere. Swasti, Klein and Harvey like the waxing moon, may your life and merit flourish grow. Through this threefold skillful pundit's deeds, live long benefiting all we meet. By the true power of two Vajra truths, three jewels, three roots, Buddha's compassion, faithful Sangha and aspiration, may this prayer be realized at once. And then we'll do the, do you want to read the names first or the blessing first?
No, the blessing first. So we do the candle?
So the blessing for everyone on the bottom of the group practice prayers. With all of you in mind, we light this lamp of clarity. May the glow of love, wisdom, shine within us, everyone, till we all rise forth born in one enlightened mandala. For all living beings, and especially tonight for Tamara, for Keith in the Bardo, and Nancy, all suffering children, Mom and Dad, Miro, Marika, all suffering animals, Minda, Annette, Franklin, Pat Niles, Ginny Vincent, Maria, Karen, Sean, Barbara, Ira, Julie, Josh, Shiva the dog, and Snake the dog in the Bardo, Nancy Davis, Bobby, Claire, Jessica, Carolyn, Selway, Joanne, all suffering children, Dina, Jennifer Welsh, Forrest Oberera, Kimmel, and Gloria Luang, Kimmy, A. Kimmel, Gloria, Kimmy, and Gloria Luang, David Brokan, Monica Neal, Rebecca Ruskin, Joe Ruskin, Deanna Schaefer, Chris Bronk and family, Patrick, Janice Satterfield, Lisa Martin, Alice Wallet, Melissa Weimer and family, Brian Wood, Benito in the Bardo, Marte or Marley, Elizabeth, Christy and Wes, Patricia and Brio and family, Claudia Gomez, Jermaine Gomez, Susan, Robin, Seth, Joe, New Job, Barry, Debbie, Joanne, Sam, Miriam, Craig, Pat Macon, Elizabeth Breuer, Stacy, Diana Cutler, Mom Cutler, Max Panzer, Michelle Panzer, Joanne and her family. We'll have a concludatory. Go ahead.
Yeah, all that luminosity just glowing in your heart, and will sound and awe, and the sound and the light go out, cleansing your entire body, touching and blessing everyone in the room and everyone throughout space, just like that. Thank you, everyone. Have
We
a good
have-
night.
We have a first
As
Sunday
questions
coming up.
bubble up, feel free to write Claire.
We have first Sunday. We have a first Sunday coming up, 10:30 teaching. We have our first class of the fall semester on Tuesday. We'll be talking about Donglen and its varieties. And we have a gala on October 1st, Saturday night. We want everybody to attend. It's a celebration of Sangha.
It's
So
20
please-
years of it's Dawn Mountain's 20th birthday party.
Please come and
And
enjoy.
We will
From
be
Russia.
auctioning great items from Tibet.